So the tonight we're all here to find out about something that we don't really know. As a rabbi, you think you know everything. You know your work to do, but unfortunately, when I had to do some practice over the phone, suddenly I found out certain things that we don't know on a different basis, even if we know a lot of interesting things. The burial and stuff like that is an addition. It's a second area of knowledge. So therefore, I thank Eliza for initiating, and thank you to Bruce Barak Bloom, who's been for over 40 years helping out in the overseas multiple mortuaries. And so we're here all together tonight to find out about something that's not a positive, not a happy topic, but find out what important is in the tradition. Because in some places it's like you have this world to make a wonderful life, and then what happens with it? The Jewish tradition, you know, that this is only a middle path. We have where the soul of the Holy Born, where the soul will be after we pass away. And only here we have a mission in this world to mitzvahs, to get more connected, pressure, to help others, in order that we are able to elevate the soul and keep it in the neshama, in order to be able to go to a higher place where it was a higher place than where it was before it came down. Now would be the time if you have a cell phone, you can put on a cell phone, put on silence. There was a guy who called an Uber. He calls the Uber and he gets into the taxi, everything's going great, they're driving, and the temperature is a little warm, so he wants to put on the AC. So he says, you know, you're going to speak to the taxi driver. He taps the guy on the shoulder. And the guy speaks out, slams on the brakes, goes crazy. And the person sorry, please. Today's my first day driving a taxi. The last 30 years, I've been driving a hearse. You may have heard the word Hebrew condition. The word Hebrew condition, the right condition, that is a group of holy people who are getting together to do a special mission. And their mission is to help prepare the body for the transition from this world. I'm in the Jewish burial. People who are arranging it, as we said, the Hebrew condition is the only group of people. It's one of those important ones, just the point where in the city, all the stores being shut down and close their store until it's been made sure that this person's funeral arrangements are done, the holiday is done, and there's only maintenance days. In Shtetl, there was a big have mortuaries or places that will take care of our deceased and our loved ones during this transitional time, so we don't have to have that illness closing down the stores. But to give you an idea of how important it is, that's one of the things. There's a few things I want to just mention. Based on the at the front on that big table, it's a little hard like this. Well, what this is emergency medical instruction. It fits inside the wall. And you can put that out and basically, once you have all the basic components, if there's somebody moved to Arizona, but the way we met with him, and he had the rabbi in his place. With the Mopar, we met him here. The rabbi in the previous place, he had this part of this wall. Massive wall, and he said, because I don't know where I'm going to be on time. And I figured if I go to my wall, and this is my rabbi, I'll give him a call and buried among them. So this is a great thing to have. There's on every whole bunch of seats. There's this paper, this one, my burial wishes, and something that you can fill out on the back page is instructions. This is made specifically for California. So you can have this filled out and you'll be able to put it notarized and have it be needed to go. There's also something that but it's called the medical directive. And it's a very important piece of paper that you're documenting and saying it's to fill out. It says who you want, how you want this taken care of, and that way you'll be able to make sure that everything's done questions. One way to find this paper that you have to pay receipts, or the other one, if you go to the same place to find out, JewishWarmark.com/lecture. I put the links over there, so you can just click on that, download it, and look it up. They said this is for this our table. Regards to questions and answers. So at the end of this, well, there's going to be questions and answers. The easiest way to do it is if you submit your questions right there, you can scan the QR code to your phone, or you go to the well, but you go to that website, say what it is, and then just put your question in the there as well. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bruce Bloom.
First part. Format this presentation starts. Well, where did I come from? So you have an idea of how I get to where I am today. I was born in Philadelphia. My father was an aeronautical engineer. When I was 5 years old, he was working in Sierra Madre. Graduated high school there. Did not love reading a word like that. Conservative Temple, which recently burned in the fires, and that was a little terrible. Those of you that were proposed needed to be completed. So now there's some estimated completed. And it's still a lot of buildings in use, not to be something that burned to the ground. I moved to Los Angeles with my family, with my parents, and lo and behold, I bumped into some Chabad rabbis, notably Rabbi Lebatansky and Schwartzy. At that time, there were the two of them, and there was Rabbi Stillman and Rabbi Kuhner, and Rabbi Reichek, who had been sent in the mid-50s by the previous Rebbe to be in Los Angeles. But that was it. And it captivated me. They answered questions I had that I couldn't get answers from the rabbis in the conservative Reform Temple, Pasadena, or others that I knew. So I was very excited. I started my spiritual journey. Eventually, I met my wife. Blind date, no less. It was traditional, and we got married. Then her grandfather passed away. She has 4 sisters. She's the oldest of 5. And the youngest sister, she was seeing a young man who was doing Taharas at Mount Sinai already. His grandfather, Mr. Sam Schreiber, he started Chevra Kadisha operations at Mount Sinai. He learned in one country. He brought his grandson in when he was 16 years old. His daughter took charge of the women's side of things. Bill wanted me to be part of it. And he came to me and said, come on. And I said, no, I'll pass. Not interested. January of 1980, her grandfather passes away. Called Bill and I said, okay, for this one, you got me. I'll come. I'll be part of it. That was at Groman Mortuary inside Eden Memorial Park. Afterwards, I talked with Bill and I said, I don't know why I said no to you to begin with. I fell in love with this mitzvah. And I have been at it ever since. It has grown. It started off, Bill was in charge of things with his grandfather at Mount Sinai. And that's where I started learning. Eventually, he and my sister-in-law, they made Aliyah to Israel. They called me up one day right before they were going to the airport. I already knew it was coming. But he said, okay, that's it. We're out of here. You're in charge of things. And it was an interesting experience, to say the least. Over the course of time, all of the Jewish mortuaries in Los Angeles contacted me to ask me if I would take on their mortuaries. Out of that experience, I learned that there was one Jewish mortuary in Los Angeles that had a gentleman He would do the Tahara by himself, which is not proper. And when he wasn't feeling quite up to it, he would call the embalmer at the place and he would ask them to wash and dress the person. And he would say the prayers at home, from which I coined the term a remote control Tahara. There were similar types of things going on at the other places. So eventually everywhere was getting kosher Taharas on the men's side. I got to know the women who were doing and knew who they were, that they were Shomer Shabbos, that they knew what they were doing, and went from there. To the point, that was the very first one, was January of 1980. Now at that anniversary time, or we're actually just past a month past. My rabbis, for questions, on top of what I had learned from Bill, which I spent 5 years with him, and learned a lot. When I had questions, I would go to Rabbi Levitansky. And when Rabbi Levitansky wasn't available, I would go to Rabbi Reichik, Rabbi Shimon Reichik. And they were my mentors in doing things according to the Minhag of Chabad. And in general, if something came up that I didn't know, that it was a new thing, I'll give you one. What do? You get a Russian immigrant, and lo and behold, he didn't have a bris. What do? And in the middle of the Tahara, no cell phones or anything back in that day. I called Rabbi Levitansky. He wasn't available, so I called Rabbi Reichik, and thank God, Baruch Hashem, he was available. And he said, I got to look it up. You're bringing that to my attention the first time. I got to check. So for about 10 minutes, I sat on hold, waiting for him. And everybody on the team going, come on. And finally he came back on the phone and he said, the Rambam teaches that if somebody doesn't have a bris, if a man doesn't have a bris, you have to give him a bris. Even 2 weeks after you buried him, you realize he didn't have, dig him up and make a bris. That's how serious it is. So I learned from him, and from Rabbi Levitansky. 40 plus years of doing this, I've learned a lot. What I want to do now is shift gears and go to things that you need to think about regarding eventually, Mashiach doesn't get here first, so you don't have to go through it. What needs to be for your eventual transition time? Just so you know, I have a application, if you will, out in the open to the entire world, as far as I'm concerned, for a new job. And my new job that I am hoping to get is that I will be assigned to a cemetery to greet the returnees when Mashiach comes. Welcome back, sir. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. And all these years of planting people, if you will, I want to be able to greet them as they blossom and grow again. You face mortality. This is the one thing, nothing else in this life is guaranteed. But if you're born, it is guaranteed that one day, the time that God has assigned to you for your neshama is going to come to an end, and he's going to want that neshama back. He's going to want that body back that he has lent to us to house our soul. We all have a mission. Hopefully, we have accomplished it. The only way you know is when you go stand in front of him and answer for yourself. There are a million jokes out there about it, but one that comes to my mind, that's sort of following on the rabbi's earlier comments. There's this lady Sadie. She goes and she wins a mega lottery. And she goes, oh boy, I'm 80 years old. I can afford the plastic surgery now to look like I'm only 60. And she goes and she gets all this plastic surgery. And she's having a wonderful time. She's crossing a street and bam, the taxi runs into her. And she dies. And she goes and she stands before God and says, God, what'd you do this for? And God goes, Sadie, I didn't recognize you. But plan ahead. Who made the first funeral plans in the Jewish nation? Anybody know? Abraham, exactly. Abraham Avinu was very smart. He bought Martha Machpelah, bought the cave at Machpelah, not just for himself, not just for Sarah, but for his whole family. He prepared ahead of time. And that is a Torah commandment, really. If Abraham did it, then how can we not do it? How can you not make preparations for something that is unfortunately inevitable? You know it's going to come one day. The sooner you make arrangements and you pick the spot. My wife and I were talking about it. For 40 plus years of doing this, and I have not put in paper where I want to be buried. Yet my family knows where I want. It's not Israel. Outside of Israeli cemeteries, don't make them your cemetery. You want to be buried in Israel? Move there and live there, and you'll be buried for free. Don't turn them into your cemetery. That's the job of land in the United States and the rest of the world. Pre-planning is the first thing. We know we're going to go. Decide on a Jewish burial. I said to begin with that God has lent us the body to house the soul and to accomplish, hopefully, lots of good things in this world, to making the world what He wants us to do. It's our choice. And at the end of Torah, God says, place before you the good and the evil. Do the right thing. When we do it, things go well for us. Don't. We have tsars. That's why we got kicked out of Israel 2,000 years ago. If you notice what's happening, I mean, you can't miss it, but if you happen to notice what's going on in the Middle East right now, what happened this past year with the missiles being thrown from Iran, yeah, a lot of physical damage to property, but how many people, God forbid, were killed? A handful. And I don't think it had anything to do with the missiles so much as it was their time, and God used that as the means for bringing those souls home. That's for everybody, Jewish or not Jewish. I will offer you, those of you over the last 35 years who have paid any attention to the news media, Karen Ann Quinn, young woman who overdosed on drugs and, God forbid, made herself brain dead, not Jewish. Her family wanted the doctors to unplug the machines. And the doctor said, can't because of it. Right? Go for this and that and the other. And the family took them to court, went all the way to California Supreme Court. The California Supreme Court told doctors, disconnect the machines except for food and drink. You cannot starve her to death. But heart pacer, all of those things, breathing, she's on her own. And the doctors said, no, she'll be dead in 24 hours. And the court said, no, disconnect. And they went back and they disconnected. And you think that's the end of the story. 10 years later, I didn't hear it. My wife heard it on KNX radio. Karen Quinlan finally died. 10 years. Doctors know a lot, but this is one that is totally in God's hands. How we get to that day, we can control that. Be healthy or not healthy, how things happen to us. But the day we're going to die, the day God says that neshama is coming home, and I'm going to repeat this multiple times. It's in His hands. We can only do the best we can to return the body to Him in as close to the shape we got it as is possible. Which leads us to Tahara. Tahara is a cleaning of the body. It is ritualistic in a lot of ways. There are prayers that we say during the course of the Tahara, but it is doing to the body at the end of life, and no matter what the age is, there is a Tahara even for preemies, for stillborns, all the way to 100-plus-year-old people. There is a Tahara that is done. We are going to give back the body as clean as we can. The same way that when a baby is born, it gets washed and cleaned. We start that way, we end that way. It is an eye-opening process. It is not for everybody. Some people cannot handle it. Others can. There's no way I could do what my wife did for a career, being a nursery school teacher. Having our kids one at a time, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old. Yes, no problem. Even a couple, if we would have had twins or whatever. A room full of little kids like that? No, 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 not me. But the Tahara dealing with the ultimate life cycle event, that I can deal with. It speaks to me. Cremation is a subject of interest these days. Cremation is something where that's surprisingly, I don't know if you are familiar with the ownership of the different mortuaries and cemeteries in Los Angeles. There is one named Hillside Memorial Park. It's near LAX. Al Jolson buried that memorial with the fountains coming down at the top of that. That's Al Jolson up there, unless the family has taken him away. But that's his burial spot. It is a Jewish cemetery, and they have a mortuary on the premises, and they are owned by Temple Hollywood, I believe it is. It's a Reform temple on Hollywood Boulevard. Temple Beth Israel, whatever. It's a Reform ownership. On their website, they have a bunch of tabs across the top, as many websites do, where you can click on to get different pieces of information. One of them is Jewish Life Cycle Guide. And in the Jewish Life Cycle Guide, they address cremation. I'm going to read to you from their website. Jewish law requires burial and prohibits cremation. This is from a mortuary and a cemetery that promotes cremation. And it's amazing. Which way are you guys leaning? And in support of this tradition is unanimity across the predominant modern Jewish religious streams: Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. The reason for the prohibition is based on the principle of kavod hamet, honor for the deceased, dignified treatment of human remains, as they translate it. Body once served as the sacred vessel of the soul during life, therefore merits respectful treatment upon death. They now advertise to say that they've got new ways of Judaism accepting it and everything, and that's nonsense. There is an acceptance or a pushing aside dealing with the issue by a lot of people that, oh, this is what you want, and it's less expensive, and it's this, that, and the other, so we'll let you do it. There is nothing in Jewish law that says cremation is okay. It is the only thing in Torah that's forbidden. And that's because cremation was used for idol worship. And literally, everything else, embalming is not approved, but okay, got to be embalmed. Joseph was embalmed. Yaakov was embalmed in order to get him to Maris and Machpelah. So we don't like it, but okay. Cremation itself, absolutely forbidden. So the question comes up. I get asked all the time, well, what if somebody's house burns down and they were burned up with it? Or they're in a car crash where there's a fire. They didn't choose cremation. That was something that happened to them. And therefore, they get to have whatever can be done for them. They get to, their remains, what there might be, get to be buried in a Jewish cemetery because they didn't choose. Somebody, halacha, Jewish law says somebody chooses cremation is saying to God, I don't believe in you. God says, okay, so your soul, you get cremated, you're done. Your soul goes away. You're not going to be able to be resurrected when that day comes, when the Mashiach comes. We have resurrection. So you want to do it? Good. It's your choice. Do the right thing. Choose the proper thing. But don't choose that. Going after the religious aspects of it. Cost-wise, yeah, you could get cremated cheaper, but by the time so many families choose, let's see, we want to have a memorial service and we want the body there, which means you have to rent a casket from the mortuary and you're going to rent clothing and provide. By the time you're done with everything, not a tremendous amount of difference in the cost. They come out very similar. Straight cremation, yeah. It is something that can, with no services, no nothing. You get handed a bag of ashes and some broken bits of bone. You hope that they are your loved one, but you don't know, and there's no way to know because fire destroys DNA. There's no way to say those are your loved ones' bones. And again, we come back to Judaism across the board says, no, this is not right. Shouldn't go for cremation. Burial, depending upon where you live, I can tell you that it's less expensive for a proper Jewish funeral to contact mortuaries down here and have your body brought from Las Vegas, where I live, to Los Angeles. It's less expensive by $2,000 to $3,000, maybe $4,000, which is a huge chunk of money. Why that is, I have no idea, but that is a fact. So, yeah, investigate, learn, check out costs because cost is a factor. But then make your plans now. Start doing it now. Yes, at the time when all of a sudden the family has to come up with however many $1,000, that's a big chunk of money. And I get asked all the time, we have a fee for doing Tahara because men who do it, the women who do it, are taking the time from their jobs in order to go do this. So if a family has the ability to pay for it, we want that. They should be compensated for it. And it's in a number of the svarim that are written about doing Tahara that this is proper. Back in Europe, there were men that were dedicated to the Chevra Kadisha, and it was their job, and they would leave their jobs, their parnasa, their income, in order to take care of someone. So Rabbi said, there's really not a bigger mitzvah. How big is this mitzvah? The Kohen Gadol, if he's out walking from one city to another, and he comes across a dead body, now Kohen's not allowed to touch a dead body, except there's nobody else around. Who's going to take care of this man? Who's going to be his shomer, his guard, until the Chevra Kadisha can come, which who knows that I have to do it. In that situation, the Kohen has to be Matame. He has to make himself impure. No other situation. But that's how important this mitzvah is. That's how important it is to take care of a fellow Jew. Even the Kohen Gadol, who the peak of the Kohen, the priest, he had to make himself a time in order to take care of something. Make your arrangements ahead of time. That way you get to pick where you want to be, which I mean, my parents are both on Sinai. They bought at a time when the pair of graves that they had bought together were $1,500, which today is like a dream figure. It's choosing where you want to be buried, and there are a lot of different factors, and I'm not going into them. Too many different locations, and there's different rules and not rules. If you get buried in some parts of the world, and it's starting to happen here, you're going to be buried multiple deaths. That's okay. That is something that has become quite common. In a town called Farsaba, there is a relatively new cemetery because the original municipal cemetery, they are burying men in one grave, women in another, 10 deep. In Paris, there's a cemetery that dates back to World War I, if I recall correctly, where they bury 8 deep. So nothing wrong with that. A lot of the cremation people say that we don't have enough land in the United States, which somebody did a study and they figured out that it would take 10,000 years to fill up all the empty land in the United States, let alone the rest of the world. So that's malarkey. The process you go through, there comes that day where you live to be 110 years old, and you know that time is running out. The doctors tell you you're very ill, this long, that long, probably have another 10 days, a week. You need to make your arrangements. Hopefully you've made them already. But now we move to what are the steps that we should be taking when we get messages like that from our doctors that the end is near. You want to start to not leave that person alone. They're called a goses. A goses is somebody who is in imminent peril of passing away and needs to have somebody with them all the time, saying tehillim, watching them, keeping them company. But then there are rules for that. We don't touch that person. Literally, we step back. Medicine, this is the case you have somebody with incurable disease that is now on hospice. Medications are withheld other than for comfort. It's a similar type of thing. But other than that, we don't touch them. Literally don't. You put your hand down next to their hand, and if they take your hand, that's okay. But we don't take their hand for the hope that we do not, God forbid, hasten anything to happen in their process to die. You don't know. It's the kind of thing you don't know that maybe moving their arm that way, a half an inch, is going to change their pulse rate or something that will hasten their passing. So we don't touch them. We wait for them to pass in as natural a way as possible. It is no fun. Went through that a year and a half ago with my wife with her sister. That's why we moved to Las Vegas. So I've been through it, been there, done that kind of thing. It's not easy, but it makes the time for the person who is on that journey much easier and much better for them. There is a confession that we say. If they can't say it, we say it with them. You think you're saying it for them, but their mind is alert. They may not be responsive, but you say the confessional for them. It ends like when Yom Kippur with Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem Kvei, Atahu Elokim. And hopefully at the last breath, we're saying that with that person. Then we call the Shem Kadisha. At that point, 20 minutes after they pass, wait 20 minutes to be sure. We'll straighten out the arms, straighten out the fingers, have them by the sides, cover them, close the mouth, close the eyes, and call the Chevra Kadisha to come and pick up the remains. Today we call the mortuary, we call Mount Sinai, we call Hillside, we call the Chevra Kadisha mortuary, or Shalom chapels, and they send somebody to remove the remains. There's a whole process for that. Why do we wait 20 minutes? I don't want to turn anybody into. We wait 20 minutes because sometimes mistakes are made, even in the hospitals. There was a case at one of the Los Angeles mortuaries going back 25 years ago, maybe, where the ladies came to do a tahara. The woman had been brought there a day and a half before, refrigerated. She's on the tahara table. And the woman in charge, who had been doing it for years and years and years, said, "I don't, she's dead." And she went and she found a feather, held it up to her nostrils. Sure enough, this lady was breathing. And it took them 10 minutes to convince 9.1. It wasn't a joke because the phone number that you're calling from is a mortuary. They took her off to the hospital, and next day she was back to Groningen because she actually did pass. It was just they were a little bit premature in doing it. And there are stories around the world that abound. It happens, unfortunately, in advanced countries, in advanced cities, where you would think the medicine, doctors, and equipment, it wouldn't happen, but it does. Chevra Kadisha, we wait. We don't instantly jump on the situation and say, they're dead. No. Let's hang in there. Be 100% certain. We now have had the removal. Remains are picked up, they're brought to the mortuary, and hopefully arrangements have been made, and the family is now going to set the date in the morning for the funeral. Do not get upset if you can't get the funeral the same day that you want it, like immediately, which is our preference. We try to bury within 24 hours at most. In New York, there are a couple of cemeteries owned by Hasidic sects that bury 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Other than Yom Kippur and Shabbos. Yontif, they will bury. They have going to the grave, and they go, and they, 3 or 4 members of the Chevra Kadisha will ride with the body to the cemetery in a hearse driven by a non-Jew, and they will be there to supervise everything. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much every day of the year. And they go in the middle of the night, they set up lights, and they bury. Speedy burial. We want the body to return to the soil so that it can release the neshama. Somebody didn't like you. I mean, they really didn't like you. You could live without them. They should live without you. They are going to die. They're not allowed to be at your tahara. And if they're at your funeral, they need to be in the background. Not saying anything against you. Because the neshama is right there, seeing what's going on, hearing what's going on during tahara, during the preparation. It's feeling what we're doing to those remains. It knows what's happening. I'm in the middle of the tahara, and I'm constantly asking Mefila, asking forgiveness. Because I don't know. I might have held the hand a little too strongly and caused pain. I have no idea. I just know that I have to ask Mefila. I have to ask forgiveness. Anything I might have done. And at the end of the tahara, ask forgiveness. At the beginning, before we start, we ask forgiveness. Constantly. At the cemetery, I, along with the guy, we always have to try and be there as the body's being lowered. And once again, ask forgiveness in case we did something we shouldn't have done. Some innocuous thing, literally, that I picked up the hand a little too hard. I squeezed it a little too hard. We're overly cautious. But I don't want to end up. I've been told that when my day finally comes that I have to stand in front of God, that there's going to be a line of all these souls that I have helped to bury, that I've done tahara on, which for all these years, it's a lot. And it's the one thing that scares me. I'm not afraid to stand in front of God. Whatever I've done, I'll pay for, no problem. But this line of men's souls that are either there with a baseball bat to go, you bought me, or to stake and say thank you. I hope it's all thank you. But I don't know. You're never too old to get involved in some way, shape, or form. That I'll say. My father got involved when he was 85 years old. Came to me one day and said, I want to come to one towers. I want to be part of what you do. And your remains are incredibly important. We'll reiterate the same facts over and over, but you want to give back to God a body that is purified, that is in an acceptable condition as He sees it, which means pretty much washed, dressed in takricha. Why takricha? Say dressed in takricha. Why takricha? What the heck are takricha? Takricha are what we call traditional Jewish burial clothes. They consist of a pair of pants, which may or may not have feet as part of them. If not, then they're separate booties. A shirt and a kittel on top of that, made from linen, is the preferable material. And there's a hood. For men, a hood like an executioner's hood. Literally, totally covers the head. For women, it's a bonnet with a veil. But also, we don't see through it. It is clothing that was instituted 1,600 years ago. Because before that, people were competing. I mean, how many of you have been to a bar mitzvah, been to a wedding, been to a bar mitzvah, and this one is more lavish than that one, and this one did that one, going to, and everybody is competing. Well, they used to compete with funerals. And poor people couldn't afford it, so they would leave their deceased by a roadside, and the city would send around people to collect the bodies. We have a minhag in Judaism for our deceased. we put a mixture of wine, vinegar, and egg. Either wine or vinegar. We put it on the face, we put it on the eyes, we put it on the cheeks. Back then, Jewish families would put it on their deceased. Didn't matter whether they were wealthy, not wealthy. Had nothing to do with anything except the bodies were brought to a central location in most communities, and then the various mortuaries and Chevra Kadisha would show up to collect the body and take it to their facility. How do you know who's a Jew? Well, follow your nose to that person covered with a sheet or a blanket or whatever, and then pull back from the face, and you're going to see because it dried white. So you would know, here's a Jew. We continue with that tradition. We have other traditions. We put broken pottery on the eyes and the mouth. Close the eyes, close the mouth. The eyes that can no longer see the wonders of God's world, the mouth that can no longer say brachos. Whether you notice it or not, at a traditional funeral in the cemetery, you'll see men, as they're coming in, taking their tzitzis and tucking them away, making them invisible. Why? Because we do not want to insult all those souls that are there that can no longer perform that mitzvah. Having tzitzis out insults that soul that can't do mitzvahs. And we don't wear them in sure. Yeah, I mean, cemetery. You'll get told by many rabbis, go out and give tzedakah, give charity on behalf of that person. Again, that's because they can't do it anymore. But if you do it in their name, they're getting credit upstairs with God. The more credit, the better. And that's ongoing forever until that soul will come back with Chiyas and Meitz. Why do we not hand the shovel? That's a tradition in Judaism. That when we bury somebody, we do our shoveling, and then we put the shovel down, we stick it in the earth, and the next person takes it, and they do their shoveling, and then they put it down. We do not want to appear eager in order to do this. We've got to do it. It's a mitzvah. We have to bury the person. We want to appear eager, so we don't pass the shovel one to another. It's a minor little thing that has a major impact. It's probably nothing that we do in funerals does not have some kind of lasting major impact on the neshama. Again, that neshama is right there, seeing what you're doing. Going back to the guy who they didn't get along with, so don't, we should be off to the side, not to upset the neshama. Funeral is over, and now that neshama with Kaddish and Kel Mole, Rachamim, that neshama, that soul is now released to start its journey up to heaven to stand before God. We all will stand before God, our personal Yom Kippur, our personal Day of Atonement, and answer for what we did or did not do in this world. Hopefully, we accomplished everything we were supposed to. Hopefully. But we will all answer for what we did. It's just a question, does that soul come back and have to repeat in order to accomplish? There's a story told about an older gentleman who always loved to say l'chaim. And he would buy a bottle of schnapps, and whoever came to his house, he said l'chaim. Lo and behold, comes his day. Goes and stands before God, and God says, what's that first thing you forgot to say? Before you l'chaim, go back. You need to make up for it. God sends his soul back down. He comes down into a grain of wheat. He's blowing in the field. And he's going, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Because he sees that there are grains falling off of other stalks of wheat. And what happens if I fall on the ground? I have to come back again. Eventually, he gets processed and put into a bottle of schnapps. Eventually, he ends up in the house of a Jew. Lo and behold, another Jew comes over to this man, and the guy says, you want to say l'chaim? And I go, sure, why not? He takes out the bottle, he takes out 2 glasses, he pours for both of them, and they both go l'chaim and start to drink without a bracha. And the poor soul was going, no, he got all that way, he's gonna have to do it again. The answer to God for what we did or did not do. Hopefully, you all say, brothers, before you eat, drink, is it's seeking permission and asking permission. We bless God for what we have, for being able to eat or drink. It's getting permission from Him to share the love He's provided in front of us. You finish a funeral. Now we enter into Shiva. Shiva is 7 days of withdrawing from the world. You have a business, stopping it. The first 3 days, it's really difficult because a lot of it is the first 3 days, business, no business, sit at home. Think about the person who just passed away. Think about all of the things it meant. Think about your life, how you can, everything except going back to work. Withdraw from the world. People come to you. Somebody sitting Shiva. One of the rules for us visiting them is that we walk in, sit down, wait for them to acknowledge us, for them to start the conversation. Comforting a mourner is about them spilling their heart out and getting us to listen, hear the wonderful stories they're going to tell us about who this loved one was. It's not about us coming in. Everybody wants to, what do I say? How do I say? You don't say anything. You literally come in, sit down, and wait for them to start the conversation with you. Then it's just following their lead. I just went through that with somebody who is one of my Italian, one of the guys that does Saharas. His father was passed away. Just got up from Shiva. And that was it. I took the phone and I called him. I just waited. And he eventually realized, oh, it's his conversation. That's how you comfort them. And then don't forget that the mourning is going to go on for a long time. I'm now 19 years since my father passed away, coming up to the 19th birthday. So, and like it was yesterday. Sure, those of you experience, which I can't imagine, we're not little children here. Nobody can understand. Everybody. I miss my father like it was yesterday. Like I was sitting with him, talking with him. Don't forget that. We all go through it. All remember what they went through. Ask them how you doing after a year, 2 years, 3 years later. Ask. It's not a bad question. It's a good question. It shows concern. If they're really your friend, they're going to be very happy to talk with you and discuss your losses. Again, it's a part of life. It's an expiration date. When it is, I don't know. I hope that mine is another 30 years down the road. I think I should take it. My mother passed at 103. There was an experience. If you have loved ones who are really elderly and have life alert button things, they're wonderful. Nobody over the age of 80, I believe, should not have one if you're living alone. But you have to also have to be willing to use it. My mother at 90 something fell and broke her shoulder in her kitchen, and the phone in the kitchen was mounted on the wall and she couldn't get up. So she dragged herself into the den where there was a telephone on a coffee table, and she called me, which I lived in the San Fernando Valley, and she was in Pico Robinson. Was in the best of times was a 20 to 25 minute drive for me to get to her. Thank God, I was part of Fatsala at the time, and I had our emergency response car that had red lights and sirens, and I used them. I got there in 10 minutes. And while I was en route, I called 911 to get people there. And I told her I'm calling them and I'm going to tell them how to get in the house, etc. My Upsala guys that lived in that area, they got there first. They had the house open, everything turned out good. But if you have one of those buttons, use them. That's what they're for. If you don't, and you have somebody who should have one, make make it happen. With my mother, after my father passed, my brothers and sister and I, we told her it's real simple. If you want to stay in this house by yourself, you absolutely have to have it, or we're putting you into a nursing home or into an assisted living, something where there are other people around. Don't want to be alone once you reach our age. Once you reach any age, but in particular, you get past 70 or 76, married, if God forbid my wife passes away before me, it's the first thing I'm doing. I'm going to get you. It is something that will potentially save your life. Or you'll suffer miserably because you didn't have one until somebody found you. In Las Vegas a month ago, there was a gentleman who people kept trying to reach him and reach him and reach him, and nobody could get to him. Finally, who this person was. Finally, somebody said, you know what, we should get the police to go do a welfare check, and they did. And he had passed away a month before. Terrible case, but he was alone. He had very few friends. And he had one of these things, especially one that has an accelerometer, so if you fall, it immediately trips it and triggers it. You get a call, if you don't answer, they send the paramedics. It's outside of the horror stuff, but it's something I've become very, very passionate about. We have to take care of ourselves. I have no idea what's going to be the circumstance, the cause of my eventual passing. I'm including it because I know there's got to be a zillion questions, more education. You need to take charge of your end of life, everything that relates to it. We have tremendous laws for everything, but if you don't access them, if you don't become part of them, they're useless. We have tremendous help things like these life alert buttons, like advisors who can give you advice on how you should handle different aspects, different situations. I have a mixed family from my children. I know there are others with similar situations. But that said, they all know what's going to happen with them. Family needs to know. And this form, and the other forms that are related to it, these are important because they are going to be scrambling around. Do pre. When you have a pre that is in place with a mortuary that has the information about the cemetery, then whoever is in charge for you, be it family or a nurse, a hospice, whoever it is, all they have to do is pick up the phone, make one phone call. Everything is put in motion. I said, don't get mad at the mortuary. Things are not happening. They are subject to a lot of delays by here in Ventura County, but over the last few years has become less efficient than they were pre-COVID, which is unique. In California, there's a thing called EDRS, the Electronic Death Reporting System. It's done through the computers. That's everything. Really fast and easy. It starts with the doctor and getting that information out to help them to fill out the paperwork. Then it's on the county guy to review it and say, okay, everything's good, approve it, and boom, things happen. Used to be we had to run that paperwork physically to the health department, which was in Denver, and it was crazy. It took a couple of days. But there are also times, I know that, for instance, Mount Sinai is probably the busiest of all our cemeteries in Los Angeles. And they can only handle a certain number of cases per day. If everything goes smoothly, it still might not be able to happen for a day or two, because it's not just Mount Sinai's mortuary that is burying people in their cemetery. It's every other mortuary and independent mortuaries that are not connected to cemeteries that are doing the same thing. They only handle a certain number of services a day. So be patient. be patient. I know sometimes people get on the phone and everybody's calling it, it just slows it down. Because the guy who is pursuing the paperwork now has to stop what he was doing in order to take your call and respond to you and try to explain it to you. Be patient. It'll happen as fast as possible. Choose wisely. I'm not going to delve into your economics, but if you start the process now of finding the place, it will be a lot easier because you can pay over time. If you are in, and I know there are those who are, mixed marriages. I just dealt with somebody, explained things to them, where her husband was Catholic, and he just passed away recently, and there was a lack of knowledge about what the options were. And she ended up using a cemetery in Sylmar that owns a bigger piece of property for non-Jews and a cemetery for Jews, right next to each other. Her husband is buried in the non-Jewish side, and she's going to be working on getting a plot for herself on the Jewish side. So they're going to be close together. That is an option. Explore it. It is available. It happens that some cemeteries will allow a non-Jew to be buried in a Jewish section with no religious service and no indication on the grave marker that there's a non-Jew buried there. I don't see that as the best alternative. But everybody will make their decisions based upon what they want to see happen. I don't know what my one son-in-law that I have is Jewish. I have no idea what it's going to decide. But that's what I said. I think that there is not a Jewish family around that look to the sides that you are going to see that there are mixed marriages. It's the nature of the United States more than other parts of the world. It's a reality. And we are all in this room at the age where we have to cope with that. We have to make our plans now while you can discuss it. Want something. Once you're gone, that's it. You're at the mercy of whoever you left in charge and whether they will do what you want. It's one of the reasons that I never made Aliyah, because I had discussions with my brothers and sister, and we never really worked anything out. There was no way that I was not going to be here. That was easy. It was 20 years ago. She outlived him by quite a bit. But these are all realities. They are all realities. Not getting away from it. Time to hitch up your pants, pull your boots up, and face it. Face them. Rather, I can contact and questions. Like on some issues. Actually thrilled that everybody came here, and I hope there's a couple hundred more watching on Zoom, spreading the word. This is a subject that we do not talk about. Bring it into the home. Bring it into discussions with children, your grandchildren. I grew up on the West Coast. My entire extended family, my grandparents, my aunts, uncles, everybody was in the Boston area. That's where my parents were from. So I would see them once a year. They'd come to visit us. Death in their home was part of what their children saw, what their grandchildren saw, because they didn't keep it away. Now, one grandparent passed away in the hospital post patient surgery. He was still in the hospital. The others passed away at home. The family that was there got to be with them and help them through that transition. So bring it back into the home. It's a money-making thing that we put our loved ones into these homes. It's kind of things. They need us. You need them. We need them. I don't want to be alone when that comes. Rather be in whatever condition at home surrounded by some much better way.
Questions again, if you, of course, the easiest way is just to go to either scan the QR code or jewishballpark.com/lectures, put it over there. As you mentioned about making sure everyone knows what's going on, as I said before, these cards and there's some on the big table. If you, that way it has all the info there. Would like to thank Mount Sinai for co-sponsoring tonight's event, as well as if you have questions that are particularly pertaining to Mount Sinai, Adam is here and he can answer. We have the Mount Sinai jacket. And if you have any questions, he is here to answer any questions. Question number one, what if somebody can't afford a burial? What are their options in the Jewish community?
There are options. There's Jewish Family Service has a free burial option. It's an investigative process, and they will only talk with you. At least when I was facing with them, only after somebody has passed, and they're going to want to see financial, not how you did last year, but they want to see current bank statements, the most current 2 months, and they want to know how about family. Do you have family that can contribute? Can other people chip in and bring the cost down by spreading that cost over a number of people? There are organizations there that will help preventing cremations and other burials. So help is out there. A lot of that, if you start planning now, if you start making your arrangements, paying for them, by the time God willing, day comes that it's needed, it will all be paid for and it won't be an issue. Going back to cremation and payments, it used to be, and apparently it has changed somewhat, that the Neptune Society in particular, if you signed up for yourself to be cremated and paid for it, it was a done deal. If you died without rescinding it, nobody else could rescind it. Only the person who had signed it and paid for it could do that. That has somewhat changed, as I recently learned, so that they will, if you bring proof to them that the person was buried, they will refund some of them. Not all of it, but some of it, which for them is a big deal. Cremation today, it's the first time I've looked at the costs in a long time. And I can't remember whether I was looking at Hillside's site, somebody, it must have been somebody else, that a cremation, a basic cremation, $7,000. Right? So, and it ain't as cheap as everybody thinks. There are places in the country where for less than $1,000, yeah, they'll give you a bag of ashes and broken up bones. The process, if you ever want to really learn about what happens to somebody who's indigent, go to LA County. I don't know the exact website off the top of my head, but they do a video. They follow somebody who was discovered, passed away in his apartment, and they collect the remains, seal the apartment. They go and they search for family, and they spend almost a year looking for family, find nobody. What's the process that they follow, which eventually is going to lead to a cremation? And they show part of that cremation. It's the last 5-10 minutes that scene is in. And if you want to see something horrible, at least in my opinion, absolutely horrible, that's the video you want to see. It's interesting how they research it. They really try to find it. But at the end of the day, there's only so many bodies they can store. So at the end of the day, everything has been tried. They will, en masse, they will, one after another, they will cremate these bodies and put them into a box and eventually take them to the potter's field. The ashes get buried. But there's no way to know. You get a bag of ashes and broken bone bits. There's no way to know for sure that that is who they're telling you, because DNA is destroyed by fire. The bones don't have any left. There's no flesh. It's just ashes. You take it on faith that that is who they're telling you, but there's no way you're ever going to really know. And again, that's where you choose cremation. Somebody who's, God forbid, gets put up in fire that they didn't obviously choose to jump in fire, that person gets full burial, whatever we can do. I can tell you, if you want to hear after I finish these questions, I can tell you about some really unusual cases.
As you said, firstly, if you are going to watch that video, which also is available on YouTube, I recommend not doing it before you go to sleep. But it's a pretty horrifying video, but if you can find it on YouTube as well. Some people say that cremation is better for the environment.
Poisons that are in the cremation process, there's nothing beneficial about it. Today, we have a whole new phenomenon. Go to cemeteries, green burial. What the heck is green burial? It's Tahara and Taricha. It's Jewish burial. That's green burial. Proper Jewish burial has body wash. The Tarichim are placed on them. That's linen. And the wooden casket, unfinished wood, is the preferred. How much greener can you get? I guess you could do without the casket. Well, that's what they do in Israel. In Israel, other than the remains from an accident, from some horrible event, a soldier, God forbid, who was killed in combat, that they contain in a casket because they don't want to upset people at the funeral. But otherwise, funerals happen without caskets. What do we need it for? They're wonderful. It's nice. It's this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, it does nothing for the deceased. It's just something nice. To carry the person there in Israel on a stretcher, sheep over everything, then lowered in the grave. In a traditional Chabad funeral, we will take the Chevra Kadisha will be the ones carrying the casket, bring it to the cemetery, take the body out, place it into the ground, and then turn the casket upside down. Upside down because we do not shovel dirt directly to the person. That would be an insult to them, even though they need to be buried. In Maras Machpelah, they're laying on shelves. Nobody buried them. Shelves. Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, and Yaakov. Laying on shelves.
Just to clarify, there's a difference when you're saying about the shelves. That would be in the side of a mountain or a hill versus. Right, I'm saying it's in the ground, just instead of going from above, you go from sideways. If somebody's cremated, or if somebody has tattoos, are they able to be buried in a Jewish cemetery?
Cremation and tattoos, two different things.
Correct.
Tattoos are something that we do not do. It is, I mean, that can be very decorative. Someone's opinion. God gave us this beautiful body. Why are we messing around with it, drawing pictures on it? The only tattoos that would preclude somebody being buried inside a Jewish cemetery is if they are religious symbols for another religion. That would be a problem. But decorative is not an issue. So it's sad from a religious standpoint, just because why are you messing up your beautiful body? But it is very common today, unfortunately. But from a standpoint, if you do not have tattoos that are religiously oriented for another religion, then you could be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Every cemetery in Europe or whatever will have their rules. You can be buried in this corner or by the gates, but you're in the Jewish cemetery. The whole grounds are consecrated. There's a whole ceremony that was just done recently, part of Mount Olive. Takes about quite interesting. I had never done it until I was asked to be part of one. So no, you can be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Cremation again. Cremains are meaningless, except in the case of somebody who was in a fire that was not their own. They didn't choose to be burned out. Fortunately, they were in a building, they caught fire, they couldn't get out, and that was the end. Why why God chose that to be the way they went. Another question for everyone. Excellent.
So that's all the questions that have been officially asked. And so you're still here, you can answer questions.
Yes. I'm here to see.
Family member died in an accident, whole body not in one piece. A piece of the body was, it was impossible. So what's that, how does that affect? Mhm.
We've already discussed. If there's, said I have all kinds of stories of that. Well, I should pronounce them. A gentleman had been disappeared a few years before. Found some body, excuse me, body parts in a river up in Northern California. And is there anything we can do? What do we know? Can we sorrow for? And I said, yeah, I don't know exactly what that. Still, I see what you have. It turned out it was a 5-gallon bucket from Home Depot, and it had bones in it that had flesh attached, and that's how they had identified through DNA and everything. We couldn't do anything, but we said the prayers that are part of Tahara that we were able to. We're not consultants and sure I was getting it right first for, but we did what we could, and that bucket got buried. And I had asked that the personnel, when it came time for the actual burial, that they would. It was going in the ground, that they would open that bucket and spill it out in the casket they would take, so that it would be able to be absorbed in the ground. I presume that they did. I don't know, but that would be it, whatever we took out. There is a organization called SACA in Israel, some branches work where there are people that go to an accident scene. Sometimes militia members get called in other parts of the country after an accident, and they will spend time cleaning up, recovering every ounce of blood, every piece of flesh that they can find, and literally with their hands and knees, please, looking for remains buried with the majority of the body. That's how important it is. Burying the whole body. Somebody has an amputation gun or a surgical, that limb needs to be preserved, preferably buried, and in a spot chosen by the family, or eventually that person, hopefully way down there, even an amputation should be buried. That's not to say save your fingernails. Some people think they do, so it's funny, but it's, if you're not sure about something like that, always ask. There is I'm not going to get into the waffles around everything, but you will find there are people who are very religious, and you take their fingernails, put them on a pile of sand, and they burn them. They are potentially harmful to a pregnant woman who might step on them. So we want to get rid of that. It shouldn't be. We're talking about sitting and learning Torah into its death. There is nothing in this world that is not covered by this law. Everything we do based on law about how to do, what's the proper way in order to give honor to God. Everything we do affects the world.
Someone had a question. Someone to be give a book that you would recommend on this topic.
On covering all of these topics, go through a lot of bunch. This book on by McLean and Dr. Goldman, Morning in Halacha, covers A to Z, the mourning process. It's a great book, but it is Jewish law. It's not fooling around with, well, maybe times this, that, and the other stuff that goes back centuries. There is only technological things that are. This is a wonderful book. cremation or burial. Get this on Amazon. He has a few other books, one including 1,000 kosher jokes. It has like categories. They are all kosher jokes. It's amazing. Just short little jokes. This book gave voice to me on a concept that I had been dealing with, but I couldn't come up with the term. Cremation, we burn our trash. Our bodies are not trash. Judaism, body is holy. Christianity is holy. It's only in the last, let's say, 100 years that Christianity has accepted cremation to be allowed. It's not something they always allowed. And in Islam, I won't even go to them, but they do something similar to a tahara. And I know that for a fact because I got asked to help them out once in Los Angeles. So go, can't hurt. So I know they do something very similar, but that's his take on it. Cremation is what we do with trash. It is what the Oriental religions do because they believe that if you don't burn the body, the soul cannot be able to move on to its next incarnation, its next body. I mean, the lady back there, and then you're next. No, but we don't bury a kosher talus. So if the talus has all the tzitzis attached, we will take one and tie a knot in. Then we bury it. But no, just one renders the whole talus not kosher and able to be buried. That is what we do with a talus that has become raggedy and it's not fit to be used anymore. We bury it. We bury books. Same thing. Torahs, Sefurim. Don't just toss them in the trash. They're old. So yeah, man should be buried wearing his talus that are in life. Yes, ma'am. Right. There's no law. You know, that's a very short thing. Each cemetery has its some of this proven out. Money in the San Gabriel years ago, and bodies were coming out of the ground. That they didn't have vaults. It has its practical purpose. There are some cemeteries that have vaults that the bottom is open, so the casket will end up being on the ground. It does serve the purpose of as casket, as remains decompose and become part of the soil, that the ground is not going to drop down. So from a groundskeeping standpoint, it makes things easier. Shop around again. There is no state law requirement that something present what happened. And even then, it's not necessarily going to work. There was a cemetery that Tahara had and drove up the road, and we had tremendous windstorms that particular time period. And there was a tree that toppled over, and tangled in its roots was a vault with the casket that was hanging in the air. So even with the vaults, even with things can happen, but it is again, its purpose is to protect the casket, keep things from moving. You'd be surprised how far a body can move underground with the earthquakes that we have, miniature little minor things. Let me take somebody else. in a proper Sahara, it's doing the way things should be, we're gonna remove them, give them back to the family. Yeah. But in a Sahara, they get removed, the piercings get removed. You're talking about their numbers, and God forbid, that was certainly not their choice, certainly not. Back when this man came out of Russia, it was not, an accepted practice, let's say, in Russia to visibly Jewish to have this. Many Russians, 70s and 80s, they did not have a risk. They were putting yourself at risk. The Moyle's life was at risk. Everybody was at risk to give a baby risk. So many people, not that religious, they were afraid, whatever the reasons, they didn't do it. Well, a lot of the Russian immigrants to this country back then came without it. I can tell you that the Moyles in Los Angeles, they were busy. They were busy. Plenty of men that didn't have a first time done properly. There was, there were so many, I can't even recall. Won't go there. But yes.
Centered parts where he was showing me, let me to play with my theory. So in a religious situation, the choice of one or another, also so is it just your choice? Some
There are religious opinions about how to handle that. Unfortunately, it's become much more common. Situation is different. Who do you want to be buried next to? Who do you want to be buried with? Who do they want to be buried with? It's not a question of just because there are so many viewpoints, and really it starts with what do you want? Who do you prefer that your remains are going to spend eternity? And one day, God willing, you're going to be resurrected. You're going to stand up and go, I didn't want to be you. What's the joke about today? George died 50 years ago, and now his wife passes away, and she's buried right next to him. And she comes up to him in heaven and says, George, hey. And he looks and goes, what the heck? I thought we had till death do us part, and you're back. You decide what you want. That's what you said. And then we'll be happy. It's not an easy question. This gentleman, I mean,
thank you. Great information. A lot to think about. So nobody wants to suffer. Yeah, especially at the end of the day. So I'd like to hear your view on do not resuscitate, pull the plug, because I know people have gone through that with their loved ones, and they see them struggling, and they go to the top of this pull the plug. And I know I don't think it's the Jewish thing to do, but I just want to hear what you have to say.
it is a very simple answer. Only use my experience a year and a half ago, my sister, that we faced these questions, and sisters pretty much decided that we're not going to do any heroic efforts. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was a situation of whatever we're gonna do, it's not going to do anything. Luckily, we don't touch the person who's, as I said, a ghost, say somebody who doctors have said they're on the verge of passing. We leave them alone because we don't want to hasten death. This comes into that category. Each case is different. There are so many circumstances surrounding that question that there's no one answer fits all. It does not exist. This is an individual decision, and it starts with family deciding what do we want to see happen and who is our religious consultant. This is another reason why filling out this form for your wishes and the form that is for what to do in these situations is so important. Because you fill that out, you tell your family or whoever it's going to, that this is what I want. You're not going to accelerate it. You're going to do what I want. If I'm in this condition, if I'm in that condition, this is how I want you to behave. This is how I want. And if you have a question, here's the rabbi I want you to consult. And you give 2 or 3 names, because the rabbi you first put down could move away. He could pass away. So you give 2 or 3 choices. And that includes whether it's Chabad rabbis, because there are a gazillion Chabad rabbis, and everybody's pretty much on the same page, but everybody has a different perspective depending upon their life story. Yes, sir.
It just, so number one is what you said about those forms. What I tell people when people ask me and they say, oh, Rabbi, I want to put you down. I say, you can put me down, but also write or another Chabad rabbi, because then you know, if you say Orthodox at this present moment in time, there's a big spectrum of what people will call Orthodox. So if you say Chabad, Rabbi Shimon or another Chabad rabbi, you know you're going to get according to what the Jewish traditions are. With regards to your question about resuscitating stuff, number one, every case is different. There are times where when you speak to the doctor, the head doctor, they'll tell you, well, if we try and resuscitate, it will cause X, Y, and Z. And it's actually going to hasten the death as opposed to, so those are things to take into consideration and speak to, your rabbinic authority. These are the situations. What do we do now? There is actually, I know at least in California hospitals, where the head doctor can make decisions for or against. They make the ultimate decision, not necessarily what the family says. So if you put on we must resuscitate, and they feel that it's not. So it's good to be in communication with the doctor. Unfortunately, a year ago when my brother passed away, I learned a lot of information about what goes on in the hospital and behind the scenes and stuff like that. And that's when we were in communication with the doctor. It made it a lot easier to know exactly how things are holding. So in addition to what you have on the paper, it's always good for the family to be in touch with the person in charge of the medical treatment.
Wow. Yeah, there should be somebody that shared. We didn't touch it.
What happens at the Hara and burial?
Somebody should be in the person. So the family can do it. Family can do it. I'll give you, for instance, it doesn't have to be family. It can be somebody who that's all they do. They'll get paid for it because it's become a job for them. It's become let's go. Yeah, somebody Jewish saying Tehillim, saying songs.
When you sign up and choose the things, when you say, I want a traditional Jewish burial, this is going to be automatically included. Double check, verify, depending on which mortuary you use. But when you say, I want the traditional, usually this will be in a package together with the Torah. As you said, Shemira, the Shomer, the guarding, there'll be somebody with the body at all times from passing until the burial. Even during the Torah process, there's still somebody who's there saying the tale.
An hour. Good enough. Listen, so I guess there are certain things that make it a problem. Okay, second, if you're a man and you put Bart right, I mean, I don't think anybody's gonna think that was religious. Yes.
Not on that one.
In our experience,
There are two ways. Number one, and it's my preference, is that the council of dealing with family asks for a recent picture of the person. And the men or women of the Tahara team say, yes, this is, and they sign a form saying it's the right person. And then they would take the name tag, or from the emergency service, whatever, name tags are there that are not placed by the mortuary, but are placed by a hospital, a rehab facility. Those are tags that we rely upon. And then the last thing is that somebody in the family says, I really want to see that it is that person. They will take you properly, take you into a side room or in the coach at the cemetery. That's the way it comes out. And they will open the casket, they will fold back over the face and allow you to. And I, from the standpoint of the law, Jewish law, it shouldn't matter. From the standpoint of the reality of the world we live in, the worst thing to have happen. There have been cases of mistaken identity. We had a case, a guy in the hospital, their name was almost identical. Hospital issued the wrong documents to the mortuaries, and one was getting involved and put in suit, the metal casket. Tahara and the prison and the Tahara's on both of them. Gentleman in the metal box was the first one. Went to the other mortuary. Next morning, the son of the deceased, who was getting embalmed, said, "You know what? I didn't want to look at my. I want to have one last look at it." And the council said, "Okay." And they took him into a room, they opened the casket, he goes, "That's not my father." An hour and a half before the funeral. So it was really short notice. Long story short, they got it straightened out. And why? God decided that this religious Jewish man had to be embalmed before, because he had ended up, he had his Tahara, just, we came, myself and somebody else, we came out there and we dressed him properly. But why did he have to be put through this indignity, this horrible thing of being embalmed? I have no idea. That's something God will tell him. It's when it got up there. But things do occasionally, unfortunately, happen. Yes, sir.
First question. With my wife, my son wanted to be able to cover the casket, and somebody said, "No, you're not allowed to do that." So when I'm asked if I want to have family carry me, is that allowed?
It is preferable, no. However, if that's what you want and it's very strong and the family is strong, okay. No, they shouldn't be the only ones. They should be adding to it. It's no question not the easiest thing for everyone to do.
It'll be okay.
As I say, it is better not, but it's not that forbidden. It can't happen. Second part.
For those parts, I know you were talking about the Tommy being on, what is that?
No, still, we do not get buried here.
During the weekend or all?
First and foremost, the film should be checked. If they're kosher, they should be offered to some poor family that cannot afford to get filmed for their son for his bar mitzvah. That's the first and foremost thing. And if they are kosher and that's not an accessible thing, then give them to a school, to a synagogue, to be used for somebody who cannot afford to have their own film, or in the case of Chabad, to be going around the city putting film onto the counter. So it's used for mitzvah. Only very film that are totally puzzled, that are totally not kosher, which takes a lot of doing. They're supposed to be checked twice in 7 years, including the boxes with parchments inside. And if they're maintained, it's rare that the film wear out before the life of the person. So yeah, no, film we do not bury until it's absolutely necessary, and we don't bury them in person. We bury them together with other film, with sparring. Properly, there should be an annual ceremony of burying things. I mean, I know Jewish Cemetery Association of Massachusetts, once a year, they have a cemetery that has dedicated lands. And they come, they bring a tractor, and they dig a hole that's probably the size of this. And trucks come in, unload chambers, books, svarim, sidurim, and washing, and alikot. Still things that are no longer used. That's the proper way of posting it. Other places, they are put into storage and preserved forever. That's how we have copies of some story from 1,000 years ago. So there are different ways of handling them to bury them with the person. Yeah, the Rambam talks about suicides. All the time, and basically it comes down to a person who commits suicide is mentally ill and is not responsible for their actions, and do not hold any Jewish honors for their burial because they were not responsible. Had they returned to their right mind, had they all of a sudden been cured, if you will, they would not have chosen to do that. So yeah, somebody who commits suicide gets Jewish burial. Tahara, Tachrit, the whole 9 yards. Yes.
I've heard that children should not double birth on the kid.
Right.
Does that make?
Because the underlying, a lot of debate on that is that kibbutz avnei, is that honoring your parents? And there are those rabbanim, and we're talking centuries, that say, no, it's not. Throwing dirt on your parents is definitely not honoring. And there are others who say, but this is a major issue, this is a big deal. They have to, this is giving up. So, like so many things, there's two sides to it, right? That's really a question at the time of the book. Say to the family, I have been doing funerals for long enough. Other ago, and again, later down the road for my village, holding me back from stop it, you're not charged. Come back. I'm so used to being in charge and making sure things happen properly. It's difficult when you're involved in things. You want to take charge. You know that you should be going to the world, but they don't get right. they sit back on the. Children. What is this note? Gives the answer. But, yeah, I wanted to show them. And I realized we turned on Kansas. Oh, yeah. Honoring our parents. So much of what we do is about basic to our ways of thinking. Yes, ma'am.
Interning in a wall in a crypt versus in the ground.
Preferably not, because crypts are generally speaking constructed as a solid thing. They're not really connected to the ground. There are some mausoleums, once in Israel, that are first time one at Sinai Mount Sinai, Caves of Abraham, where it is made in a culture back. Each space is surrounded by earth, so that you are connected to the earth, because it doesn't say you shall be buried in concrete. The Torah is very specific. From dust you came, and dust you go back. You can't do that really in something that's strictly concrete. I had the honor of being a witness for a family whose father had buried her mother in a wall, and then when he passed, she had him buried in the ground. She bought double spaces, and when the year of mourning for him was up, she arranged it to take her mother out of the wall and put her into the ground. And she didn't want to be present for it. She needed somebody to verify the whole thing and say that it was her. And she asked me about the book. I asked my child a question. Check ankle for the and she was not involved as part of the services that were rendered to her. So I asked that very specifically. But she might as well have been totally desiccated, skin shriveled, and no decomposition whatsoever. Because the vault is airtight. Whatever bacteria were there, yes, they didn't live very long, so it would be too close. So
The crypts in Mount Sinai, Hollywood Hills, are not the same as the crypts in Simi Valley?
there
With the
are
earth?
similar ones that are here that they have caves of Abraham. You have both kinds of Simi Valley, correct?
But what about Hollywood Hills? Fully what? I'll get with you afterwards. Okay,
Just to put my 2 cents as from a rabbi perspective, not from the halachic side, but from the emotional side. There's something therapeutic about watching the casket being lowered and the earth going on top. And I've seen that same closure doesn't happen as much when it's just the coffin is put into the wall and the curtain closed. So from a therapeutic for the family, I was actually in the ground makes a very big difference with them.
Everybody tells me 6 to roughly 18 inches of earth in between bodies. That's what they do in Israel, Paris, wherever they're probably. There is a separation with dirt between this body and the next one up. So again, not small cemetery in Israel where they're burying now 10 deep. Space is an issue inside the city.
If there's some people, the cards are gone. If you have a look on this paper, the bottom is NASCK. That's where they're from. You go on their website and you can either get the card or like download a paper.